Hi, this is Cub for Military Podcast. Why many veterans of PTSD want to be in the fight? Good morning. Today I want to talk to you about something most people don't understand, and a lot of veterans don't even say it out loud, but I'm going to this morning. Why many of us with PTSD, when we see operations unfolding on TV, feel like we want to be pulled into that fight. Not because we love war, not because we like chaos, but because that's where we grew up. I was very young back then when I went into the military. We didn't learn this as adults. We were shaped as young people. For many of us, this didn't start later on in life. I was doing operations at 17 years old. That's when I went in. While the other kids were figuring out who they were, I was already being trained to, follow a chain, watching sectors, carrying responsibility, and protecting others. Making decisions that mattered. There isn't a lot going on now. That that really does something to you. It doesn't just train your skills, it wires your identity and your nervous system, and that becomes a problem. Operation gave us structure and meaning. In operations, everything made sense. There was a mission, there was a role, there was accountability, and there was a purpose. You weren't judged by opinions. You were judged by, reliability. You knew why you were there, and you knew who you stood next to. You knew what mattered. That kind of clarity doesn't fade. So today is a real problem for a lot of us. PTSD doesn't remove the pull. It complicates it. Here's the part that civilians don't see. PTSD doesn't erase the desire to engage. It just, it adds, we know it's an added cost. So when we see current operations on TV, part of us wants to step in, another part knows that staying activated, what it does to us. That creates tension. We don't miss the danger, we miss the clarity in our purpose. So, it's really hard when we watch something like that on TV. Why civilians' life can feel so hollow to us. Civilian life often feels like noise without meaning, arguments without consequences, problems without stakes. For someone who grew up in operational like myself, that can feel very empty. So when real missions appear on the screen on TV, something inside me says, that's where I want to belong. That's where I belong. Not because we're broken, but because that's where life once made sense to us. So anyway, this is a conditioning. It's not a failure. Wanting to be in the fight doesn't mean PTSD is winning. What it means is that you were useful early. You carried responsibility when you were young, and you were forced under pressure, and we were formed under pressure, and no one taught you, how to stand down without losing yourself. The reality we live with now is living with PTSD means holding to two truths at once, which is very difficult. We still feel the pull to be engaged. We want to engage. We have to protect but at the same time, we have to protect our nervous system. Walking away from the TV or leaving a restaurant early, turning down the noise. That's not weakness. That's earned by discipline. Anyway, in closing, what I can tell you, many veterans of PTSD aren't struggling because they're weak. They're struggling because they grew up fast, and they would rather be engaged and then being replaced into a mission like we have now, which is civilian life. And if you're listening as a civilian, understand this. The fight didn't make us broken. It made us who we are today. Learning how to live forward with civilian life is very difficult for us. It's a real battle for all of us, especially with the stuff that's going on TV today. I can remember talking to one of my brothers from the first 508. He had already been in Vietnam. He was already in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I texted him the other day and I said, something doesn't feel right, brother. He said, yeah, I know. The operations on TV, we want to be in the fight. And, and that's true. I can remember that, he got a hold of me probably about 9 years ago, he had gone to Afghanistan as a private contractor, and he got a hold of me and said, "Hey, brother, why don't you come here and watch my back?" You know, in an instant, I turned around and I left the state, and I went away for a couple of days to train, and then I called Virginia, you know, and I was supposed to go there to train a little bit before I could get deployed to Afghanistan. But he came back from that tour, and he didn't go back, so I didn't go. But I wanted to be in the fight. All he had to do was pick up the phone and say, "Hey, brother, I want you to watch my back." He said the very next day, I took off out of state so I could train. Anyway, take care of yourself.